Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the UFC preview show for UFC Vegas. Not a number. UFC Las Vegas is what I've been calling it on my shows on this channel throughout this week. As you see, it is just myself, E. Spencer Kite, your friendly neighborhood Spencer Man, and the young king, the sickly young king this week. Unfortunately, Mr. Harry Powell, our usual shepherd on this show, Mr. Ian O'Neill, is getting ready for a trip home. And listen, trips home and getting all of those things sorted out are far more important than coming and chatting with us two idiots. Even though this is a very good fight card and we love having Ian here, getting sorted for going home, far more important. Io, Olivia, we wish you all the best on your trip. We will miss you over the next couple of weeks. But Mr. Powell, how are you, sir, other than under the weather?
I'm grand. Yeah, no problem. Got a little bit of a cold, but that's because I'm a fucking idiot. And so, yeah, really good. Really, really ready for this card. Great card.
Teaching early morning classes and just burning the candle at both ends has caught up to you. It is a thing that I have learned in my 44 years not to do anymore because it would take less time for me to get sick in the nature that you have. And so I feel bad, but also learn your lesson, get some more sleep. All of those things. Take better care of yourself. Yeah, there you go. I was expecting a thanks, Dad, but sure, we'll go. As you mentioned, a really great card. A really great card. I talked about this on 10 things this week. This is a great card. Normally, the event after a pay-per-view is just kind of like, sure, this is a thing that's happening. This weekend, this is a thing that's happening. Let's go. Let's just jump right into it. Headlined former bantamweight champion Petr Yan versus surging contender, 8-fight winning streak, the machine Merab Dvalishvili. I adore this fight. It's going to tell us a lot about both of these guys. Petr Yan comes in on a 2-fight slide. He's lost 3 of his last 4, but he still might be the best bantamweight in the world. Merab Dvalishvili has won 8 straight. He's amassed 63 takedowns in his 10 UFC appearances. But he hasn't really beaten this caliber of guy yet. The 2 best wins are Marlon Moraes and Jose Aldo. All respect to those gentlemen. There you go, on the downside of things. So this is the one that tells us, and I cannot wait for it. I know it has you excited as well.
Absolutely. Like, the thing that intrigues me the most about this is, for the longest time, it felt like Petr Yan was just, and I allow myself to fall into this trap all the fucking time, right? But you get somebody like Petr Yan who just feels and seems so complete, looks like a great athlete, has great takedown defense, his footwork's great. He's when he strikes, he's vicious. You know, he looks to hurt people. What he did to Jose Aldo, I mean, that really left a bad taste in my mouth. Not because it's, you know, this fighting at the end of the day, it is what it is. But we should never see Jose Aldo turtled lying in a pool of his own blood, you know, with Petr Yan on top of him, just smushing his face. But you look at him, and when he's on, he's insanely good. He has everything, really, really has everything. He's a stalwart of that Thailand scene, especially when he's in camp. And I know a couple of guys that go out there and have been out there, and they will tell you, like, he is a demon in the training room, an absolute demon. And then you have somebody like Merab Dvalishvili, who, you're right, is a surging contender, maybe not the most conventional way that we look at fighters in this division, because generally in these divisions at 135 and 125 and equally the slightly higher weight classes, we tend to find that every fighter at the upper echelon is so well-rounded that they can do everything. Yes, they have individual styles and they have individual preferences on the way in which they paint their pictures on their canvases, but generally everyone can do everything. And it feels still that there is a specialism with Merab Dvalishvili, and he has not yet had to not use it. He's not yet been stopped using it. He's not yet got to a position where somebody can stop the 63 takedowns in 8 fights. And it's, I don't know. Like, this isn't a criticism. I mean, it is a criticism, but the thing about Dvalishvili that I don't like is nobody needs 63 takedowns in 8 fights. Like, what that tells me is that his ground control isn't great, but his rebuttal and what it should be is, well, stop it, stop the takedown.
Yeah,
Right?
I actually think there's a little bit of like, I think he takes a little bit of sadistic pleasure in chucking guys to the ground. I mean, he had 2 fights back to back, and I can't remember the 2 opponents offhand, but he had back to back fights where he had 12 and 13 or 11 and 13 takedowns. And I think there's a little bit of sadistic pleasure in it. I spoke to him last week for a story that's up on UFC.com now. And when I asked him, like, this is your first main event, you get 25 minutes here. How many takedowns can you get in 25 minutes? He got a great big smile on his face and was like, normally, I think a lot. Against Petr Yan, we'll have to see. I think there's a little bit of, I know this is the thing that breaks you. Could he maybe keep guys there? And would it aesthetically, for fans, in terms of the damage that he accumulates, for the judges, would it look better if he took you down once and went the Khabib route and just smashed you out? Absolutely. Make things a little easier on himself? Sure. I think he relishes a little bit in the like, oh great, you think this is just the one? Cool. Have another and another and another and another. But I do think this is a fight where we're going to see, I think the Jose Aldo fight, we saw the limits a little bit, right? 0 for 16 on takedowns. It was fought almost exclusively against the fence with short shots. His effectiveness is basically that he just neutralizes the other guy. And the question I have going in and talked about on One Question is just, can Petr Yan sort of stifle that and force Merab to fight his fight? That's the really interesting clash here. In my head and in my heart, I think he can, but I'm really interested to see it. I'm really interested to see that played out on Saturday.
Well, for me, the thing that, and I picked Petr Yan to beat Aljamain Sterling the second time, and we saw what happened there. I think Petr Yan struggles in the, and I don't like doing this delineation, as you know, but struggles in the jiu-jitsu realm, right? In straight wrestling, he could do the wrestling, right? But that was one of the criticisms of one of the guys that went out to Thailand, was the wrestling is really, really good. The jiu-jitsu is trash. And the guys don't train when they're out there. They do the wrestling classes. They do all that stuff, cage wrestling and open wrestling and whatever. And then they do their striking, but they don't do any jiu-jitsu. And on the ground against Aljamain Sterling, who is a control-based grappler, right? He's a sniper. He's a submission specialist.
Right.
But he will happily keep your back for 5 minutes and ride you out and search for chokes and look for strikes and all of those things. That's where Petr Yan seemingly has struggled. That's where he was exposed to struggle. When Aljamain Sterling got his back, Petr Yan was unable to escape. And he was trying. He really was trying. But he was doing the wrong things to try. And Aljamain wasn't breaking a sweat and was just sticking to him like glue. We then look at some of the clinch situations against Jose Aldo. The foot sweeps, a couple of the takedowns, a couple of the trips, a couple of the situations where he off-balances Jose and looks for takedowns just to, really stick it to him that there is not just a striking fight here. Corey Sandhagen, the same. And I feel like, and I'm going out on a limb yet again for Petr Yan, the skill set that I see him look for, the high pace, high pressure, hits you really hard, happy to scramble in any situation, has really good hips. That's a tough out for Merab Dvalishvili. And the clinch game of Petr Yan, who, let's be honest, is not a spring chicken at this point, right? He is not a spring chicken at this point. But the clinch game is far sharper, I believe, than what Jose Aldo's was when they fought.
I think so as well. And the real telling point to me, I think, is going to be early. You and I have spoken about, you've spoken about in One Man Booth episodes in the past about Petr Yan being, it's not even necessarily a slow starter. It's a willing slow starter. It's that he's happy to go out there and take those first, even if it's just 3 minutes, to make reads, get range, but it's usually the first round. And Merab's the kind of guy that he's just coming across that cage. And inside a minute, he's looking for that first takedown. He's looking to get on your hips. He's looking to get on a single. He's looking to get you in the air and dump you to the ground. And so the thing I'm looking forward to in this, because I agree with everything you just said about Petr Yan's ability in the clinch. We've seen all of that in scramble wrestling. I think he can survive here. I think he can have success, not just survive. I think he can certainly dominate this fight. But it's going to be that first couple minutes to me of, let's see what Merab brings. Does Merab look to be more control-based this time around? Does he grow from and take from what Aljo was able to do in those two fights, the positives that Aljo was able to do in those two fights? And can Petr Yan just recognize, I gotta be on and firing right out of the chute, because this dude is coming 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, I do question when we see guys, and this is what kind of why I was so impressed with John Jones, right? Is when you look at guys at this level of, or this era of their careers, we don't see a ton of changes very often, you know? Like, they're kind of who they are. Now,
For sure.
They might be able to go out and add a little sprinkle of something for a game plan change or whatever, like Jan Blachowicz, Israel Adesanya, where it's, we're going to strike with him for a couple rounds and then we're going to surprise him with a little takedown there and we'll move on from there. Fine. I'm thinking ahead to the next preview show with Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman, and there's not a ton of change that we've seen in Leon Edwards over his career, right? We've seen some change in Kamaru Usman from when he was essentially a complete novice in MMA to now. And I think that's a really interesting point in that fight. And here, you mentioned, is Merab going to be more controlling? The same
Probably not.
Right, because for the same reason that you say you think he gets a sadistic pleasure out of draining, exhausting, and dominating people in that way, I think it's too intrinsically linked to the way that he fights and why he fights and what he enjoys about fighting. Because there is something that, yeah, it's frustrating when a guy takes you down and you can't get back up, but you train for that, though. You know?
Right.
In the gym, if you have a guy who's a good wrestler and he takes you down and he controls you, you're not comfortable, but you're aware of these situations. It's uncommon for you to have a guy that will just let you back up and work and work and work and drop you again and let you back up and drop you again and let you back up and drop you again. And it is debilitating. It is exhausting. Is exhaustion going to be a factor here? I don't think so. Petr Yan is a cardio machine. I don't really think we've ever seen him slow down in fights. And so a win here for Merab Dvalishvili, I feel like he has to be perfect. He has to, as you say, run over the cage and put a stamp immediately. But then I actually think in this fight, it's more important that he does it in the second. Because as we say, Petr Yan might just take it for a round.
Right.
Take all the reads and be like, cool, bro, thanks. You took me down 6 times in this first round. Now I know.
Come and do it for the second and
You're
the third
fine.
and the fourth and the fifth. Yeah.
Right.
The interesting thing about another interesting piece of this fight to me is the ramifications going forward. So it hasn't been made official yet, but as far as we understand, excuse me, Aljamain Sterling is going to defend the bantamweight title against Henry Cejudo. Petr Yan obviously has a history with Aljamain Sterling. Merab Dvalishvili, best friend and training partner of Aljamain Sterling. We also have Sean O'Malley sitting here just kind of waiting in the ether, waiting in the wings, not sure what's going on, which he seems a little bit okay with. Really fascinating to see what this does at the top of the division, how things shake out. Because if Merab wins, truthfully, he shouldn't have to fight again, because 9 straight wins and you beat Petr Yan, it's enough to earn you a championship opportunity. He would then have to either be rooting for his best friend to lose or his best friend to do what he said he would do and put the title on the ground and go up to featherweight. They'll cross that bridge when they come to it. As I said, I spoke to Merab last week. We talked about that, and he said, look, Aljo's a great friend. It's amazing that he would do that, but we got to get through Petr Yan first. If Yan wins, well, he's already fought Aljo twice, and he's already fought Sean O'Malley. So it then creates this weird, like, where does he go? What comes next? All stuff that we will talk about on Tuesday, I'm sure. And this is maybe my setting you up to have some names and some ideas for Tuesday. But it's a fascinating sort of peak at the top of this division that now with the reintroduction of Henry Cejudo becomes even more compelling.
I mean, I don't know what we do, is the honest answer. Because the top 10 fighters are all booked, right? I think the top 8 fighters, like Sugar Sean doesn't have a fight, and Umar Nurmagomedov doesn't have a fight, Dom Cruz doesn't have a fight. I don't want to see Dominic Cruz in any one of those fights, thank you. But
everybody is taking aim at Dominic Cruz right now. Deiveson Figueiredo has just come out and been I only fight the best. Give me Dominic Cruz. And look, I love Dominic Cruz. I respect the career that he has. But if you're out there being like, hey, I only fight the best, give me the old guy that got knocked out on his home turf back in the summer, you're not looking to take on the best. You want to make a splash, Deiveson Figueiredo? Call out Umar Nurmagomedov. Give me that one.
Holy fuck sticks. Yes. Or even do Sean O'Malley.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it does really, and like, I do, sorry, I was just coughing there. No worries. I do think there's an interesting political point here because Aljo made a public promise to vacate and go up. And if Henry wins, then that's kind of fine. It's easy. It's great, right? But do the UFC do him in a title fight immediately? Because if he stayed at 135, you best believe he gets a rematch. Because that's just how it goes, right? So even
I don't know that he would get that rematch.
Oh, I don't know. It depends on what happens in the fight, right?
Sure, but I don't. So my case, not knowing what happens in that fight, would just be that he hasn't been a super long reigning, super dominant champion. Right? It's the DQ win. It's the close split decision. It's the TJ fight. So it's not like we have these 5, 6, 8 title defenses and a bunch of them are like smash jobs where we've got a tenured guy and we're like, look, he's been here for 3 years. He gets a shot.
But Deiveson Figueiredo wasn't the most dominant champion either, right?
Yeah, but Deiveson Figueiredo, the third fight only came together because Alexandre Pantoja was hurt.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. It was going to be, all right, well, you've got a draw and a loss. You're not fighting him again. And then Pantoja wrecked his knee and Figueiredo lucks into it and wins the belt back. And then we get 4.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah, it will be.
Take the weekend to think about it.
Yeah. I mean, fuck. There's no, like, I was just looking at the rankings there, right? And the matchups. The top 30, basically all of them are matched. What the fuck are we doing?
It's an amazing division. And we've got a bunch of them to talk about on this show that we will get to. So we will move forward. A fantastic main event, though. I think they're number 2 and number 3 in the division right now. Just an amazing fight, a super compelling fight to close out the show on Saturday. Co-main event is in the heavyweight division. Alexander Volkov versus Alexander Romanov. I'm not that sold on the matchup. Like, I don't necessarily like the matching of Volkov coming off a very good win with Romanov coming off his first loss against the guy that's further behind and that Volkov is already beaten. But just from a stylistic perspective, just from a give me more chances to see each of these guys standpoint, I'm looking forward to this. And I know it's a fight that you're really curious about on Saturday.
I am, because Romanov had such an amazing start to his UFC career. And Tybura is an awkward fighter, right? He's an awkward fighter in that he's a kickboxer, right? Let's be honest. He's a kickboxer, but he can do a bit of the grappling. He can do a bit of the shove you against the fence.
Yeah, he's a weird 240-pound kickboxer. Like, it's awkward. It's not Serial Gone kickboxing. It's Husky Boy kickboxing.
Yeah, it's more Jan Blachowicz than it is Cyril Gagné. Yeah. But he can do I'm going to shove my chest against you on the fence, put my head under your chin and just grind for a little bit. And okay, he didn't do that to Romanov. He just stuffed the takedown and beat him on the feet. But Volkov is, I understand what you mean by the matchup, because Volkov is like Tybura +1, Like, he's long, really long. He could do the kickboxing things. His takedowns aren't the best, and his takedown defense isn't the best either. And so I think this is kind of where we are. It's a question to Romanov of, have you shored the striking up? And if you have, grand, are you able to get to the takedowns and do things? If you have not, we're going to see it. But it also feels to me like the UFC is still riding the Romanov train pretty hard and is saying, look, you go in here and you beat Volkov, grand. Now we can put you with, maybe Tom Aspinall when he returns, maybe whatever, when they return. This is a co-main event slot on a really good card just before a massive European show. That tells me something about the way the UFC see Alexander Romanov. Because the UFC are kind of happy with where Volkov is. If Volkov goes in and beats this dude, you're not going to see him against John Jones anytime soon, let me tell you,
Yeah, he's very much the guy that to me now is sort of that gatekeeper to the tier of contenders, right? To that group. I think he's probably 7 or 8 in the division, and the 6 or 7 that are ahead of him are all guys that are in that championship mix. The Pavlovich, the Curtis Blades, Tom Aspinall, folks like that. The thing that's interesting to me as we both deal with clearing our throat problems is just, I think ideally it's best if Alexander Romanov wins. Like, if we're just picking results, it's certainly best if Alexander Romanov wins, becomes a fresh name to move forward. I just don't know after that last performance if he's capable. And that's the intrigue of this fight, right? You got, for the first time, defeated, shown some of the holes, or maybe the second time that you were shown some of the holes and you didn't have to correct them after the Juan Espino fight. Have you fixed it? The other thing to me is I just want to see if Alexander Volkov, and I talked about this on 10 Things I Like, I want to see if the performance we saw against Jairzinho is actually true. We talked about with Merab, and you're making the face. Dive in. You don't think he's just suddenly decided to become a little more aggressive? That was a one-off situation?
I just think Volkov knows how to fight, but picks and chooses when he really gets up for fights and when he doesn't. And that happens when you've had, how many professional fights? Yeah,
45.
I was going to say we're nearing 50 fights now. You can't have too much left in the tank. Like, I've been listening to Chael Sonnen on a podcast recently, and the way he talks about the latter end of his career he was just turning up for a paycheck. Like, it wasn't that he was there thinking about, oh, fuck me, I'm really up for this and I'm going to do stuff after this. And here's this big plan, this big map and whatever. Volkov's 34, but he might as well be 304 with the miles on his clock from his MMA career. 45 fights is absolutely no joke. And I'm sure there's some kickboxing exhibition or pro bouts in there too. And so, yeah, I also think Jairzinho's just not that good, if I'm really honest.
Oh, I agree with that. Just, we hadn't seen that sort of go forward, be aggressive, get this guy out of here. It had been, I'm going to chip away, I'm going to pick away, I'm going to use my range, and I'm going to win a decision, or I'm going to get you late. And so I just want to see if he has a little bit more fire to him early and comes out and looks at this guy and is like, you're not on my level. I'm going to just get you out of here. We're not even going to mess around with the ground. I'm not going to give you a chance to do any ground and pound on me or hunt for weird submissions. I'm just going to get you out of here.
I mean, I will say, like, I just said, if Volkov is in a position where he wins this fight, he's probably not getting a title shot. If he puts together a first round stoppage and then goes out and does it a third time, he's got a shout. He's got a shout. I don't know who they put him against, right? You're not going to see him fight Tom Aspinall again anytime soon, but you could do a, insert fighter, right? No problem. And we'll see. Because when John Jones beats Stipe, I don't think John Jones is going to ride off into the sunset saying, well, that's it, I'm done now. I think John Jones would happily destroy all of the scrubs underneath Stipe Miocic and Cyril Gagné. Because like we talk about in some other divisions, there is the top tier echelon fighters, and then there's a big old gap. And I think that's accentuated in heavyweight.
The thing that I wanted for this fight and the thing that I think will come to pass should Alexander Volkov win this fight in dominant fashion is Jailton Almeida. I think you use Alexander Volkov as the litmus test, as the elevation test, because he's fought the guys that are ahead of him, right? As you mentioned, he's not fighting Tom Aspinall anytime soon. He's lost to Curtis Blades. He's lost to Cyril Gagné. We're done. Like, we don't need to see him in there with Sergey Pavlovich. Like, if Pavlovich loses to Curtis Blades, we don't need to continue whittling this down further. Let's see if we can elevate Maladino. Let's see if we can elevate Jailton Almeida.
You hate Alexander Volkov, don't you?
I don't. I just want to see people elevated and it not be this dumb, slow progression all the time. And it's been a dumb, slow progression.
Yeah, especially at heavyweight. Especially
at heavyweight. And like, I feel bad. I actually feel bad for Alexander Volkov. I feel bad for most of these heavyweights, probably especially Curtis Blades, because the last bunch of years, it's just been a whole bunch of sameness at the top, where we're getting these rematches, where we're getting a year off last year with the belt not being defended, all of these different things, to where we've had, as we talk about with every division, the meat grinders, the gauntlets that people go through where they just get knocking each other off. So let's get some new names in here. Let's get some fresh blood in here. And if that means Alexander Volkov has to be sacrificed to the gods for Jailton Almeida to come forward, so be it. We move to the third fight on the main card, a fight that was a main event a couple of weeks ago, Nikita Krylov and Ryan Spann. You still hate this fight, but I adore the fact that it is here. I'm looking forward to it. It's two guys on 2-fight winning streaks that are in the thick of, admittedly, a shallow division. And if either one of them puts on a performance, they are facing a top 5 fighter next time out. And that stuff, regardless of what you think of these men, carries weight, carries value. Why are you a hater?
I mean, that's just who I am in my heart, actually, Spencer. And so there's not much I can do about it. But I mean, look, I think the problem I have is, I think like middleweight, light heavyweight is quite a dry division, right? There's not a ton there that I am exceedingly excited for. I don't feel like we are seeing... I'm going to make a slight tangent. Like, one of the things I like about fighting, especially with the divisional aspect of fighting, is you get to see how a crop of men or women are advancing MMA in like a mini test tube, in like a mini petri dish, because there will be trends that you will see that are both overarching across all divisions, but then you'll see individual trends start to crop up. Like, for the longest time, we've seen the head and arm throw in female divisions, right? Almost recently, we've seen a lot more reverse broomstick takedowns, sort of from the 145 to 170 divisions, right? You then look at the 125, 135 divisions, and it's all like big, scrambly, must shoot, must do like jiu-jitsu based, grappling based takedowns, because it's so hard to pin these guys down into a solid position that you can actually just shoot on them, right? And that makes Merab Dvalishvili so special. Anyway, we then look up at 185, 205, and I just don't see the pushing of MMA from them. And it feels like that twilight zone for me, where heavyweight, we are seeing some advancements, especially now John Jones is in that division, and we saw the performance that he gave against Cyril Gagné. But for me, and this isn't anything disrespectful to the fighters, I'm just looking at the divisions as a scientific experiment, or as a philosophical pushing of the sport. And I just don't see it as much as I see it in other divisions. And that kind of just leads me to be a bit more meh about those divisions. And again, that's no disrespect to the fighters themselves, But this fight, I'm like, cool, what are we going to learn about MMA here? We're going to learn that one of them is probably the better athlete, that Ryan Spann hits really hard, or that Krylov's got a chin. Like, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you tend to think of it, and it's one of the reasons why we work so well on the takeaways and just in general as friends that discuss this stuff all the time, whether we're recording or not, is because we come to it from these two different perspectives where I am looking for some of that narrative advancement. I am looking for the answers to the immediate question, and you're looking at it from what is this advance of the sport? What does this show me about the division as a whole? Maybe the athlete themselves in that regard. And to that end, I certainly agree. I feel like 205 has always been the kind of we are who we are division, right? Like guys bring their best and they have it. And some people, it is a fairly well-rounded toolkit. John Jones being an outlier. We're throwing him away. He's an outlier. Usually is a fair, some guys are well-rounded. Some guys are good wrestlers, whatever it is. But as you said, there isn't a lot of that change. One of the things you mentioned, heavyweight in there, we've seen over the years of the different eras, even just simple things like body composition has been a changing factor at heavyweight that has created intrigue. We had all the big boys. Then we had the 230 to 240 Junior Dos Santos, Cain Velasquez types after the big fellas, right? After Brock Lesnar and Shane Carwin and Frank Mir deciding, well, I've got to be a big husky boy too. Now we have super athletic, but also big boys. And so that part changes. I agree with you on the nothing really seems to change too much at light heavyweight. From a skill perspective, from a what we've seen of them lately perspective, is there any piece of this fight that intrigues you that you're looking for answers to?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke slightly when this was going to be the main event of the card, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. And it was kind of like, can Ryan Spann put it together? Can he stick to a game plan? Can he be present in there? I think Ryan Spann has a greater upside than Nikita Krylov. It feels like we know Krylov's ceiling now, whereas there are some sparks from Ryan Spann, and if we can see them, then great, and he can probably be a contender in that division. But if he goes out and puts on an atypical performance of Ryan Spann over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, Krylov will probably just decimate him. But I just want to touch on the light heavyweight thing one more time. Like, I actually think it's declined drastically, because we look at the John Jones era, right? And let's just talk 2012, right? 2012, we're looking at Brandon Vera. Okay, whatever. But we're talking Ryan Bader, Shogun Rua, Quinton Jackson, Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort, Chael Sonnen, Gustafsson. Like, okay, Gustafsson is absolutely the new era with DC and whatever, but there's a pocket in there where there are some excellent fighters, really genuinely excellent fighters. Okay, by the modern standard, they're not all well-rounded, right? They're not all, in modern MMA, they'd get absolutely murdered by an average fella. But for the time, it feels as though it's a little like the Roman Empire, right? And the Roman Empire built from the ruins of nothing into this wonderful myriad of festivity all the time, this sort of utopian period, which was the John Jones rise to the title, given the crop of fighters he had. And then there's the gluttony era of John Jones, where we see him and whatever. And what follows gluttony? Well, dystopia follows gluttony. And it feels like that is the light heavyweight division right now.
Come for the MMA talk. Stay for the discussions of the Roman Empire and dystopia in the light heavyweight division. We move to featherweight. Ricardo Ramos against Austin Lingo. It's an intriguing fight, right? Ramos is one of those dudes that is just, he's the quintessential flashes guy to me. That's what I said on Wednesday on One Question. You see little pops and you go, man, if this kid could just be consistent. And so this feels like an opportunity. It's another one of those sit down, see if he can have the consistency. Because last time out was that spinning back elbow against Danny Chavez that was set up. It wasn't a Molly McCann, I'm doing things and now I'm going to throw it. It was I'm going to touch your knee and get you thinking about the takedown and come up and put you out. Lingo's a hittable dude. He's a guy that likes to get out there and just stand on a dime in the center of the cage and swing it out with you. So let's just see if Ricardo Ramos can put some things together and be somebody we really need to start thinking about or paying even closer attention to at 145.
Yeah, because I mean, if we just look at his losses, right? He loses to Saeed Nurmagomedov. These things happen, gentlemen. These things happen. Lerone Murphy, these things also happen to happen, right? And then you have Zubaira Takukov. And look, Zubaira is the same fighter as Ricardo, actually.
100%.
If he tried in fights all of the time and was consistent, he'd be a fantastic fighter.
Right.
Struggles to make the weight. His body composition for 145, we're used to seeing everyone shredded with abs and whatever, unless you're, an older fighter. And Zubaira just looks like he turns up looking like me and rocks on in there with his haircut that I had at 14 and wrestle fucks a couple of lads. And then, it's one of those. But
yeah,
Ricardo Ramos is a very exciting fighter. I really like watching him. He always really pushes the pace and really wants it and really goes for it. It's crazy to me that the Ayman Zahabi knockout was in 2017 because to me that was like 2 years ago. But yeah, we need to see something from
Ricardo. We need to see some consistency because there have been those flashes. There have been those good moments. As you mentioned, the losses are defensible losses. If that makes sense, they're losses that have aged okay. They're not like bad losses, but still, you gotta do things consistently. You mentioned Saeed Nurmagomedov in there. He is in the next fight at bantamweight. We get 5 bantamweight fights on this card. All of them are intriguing. It is the best division in the sport right now. No questions asked. This weekend is going to further illustrate that. Saeed Nurmagomedov, Jonathan Martinez. You love this fight. Tell me why.
I'll be so shocked if one of these fellas isn't in my spotlight on the Monday following these fights. I'll be so shocked. Jonathan Martinez, really, really fun fighter. I didn't really need to see him against Cub Swanson, if I'm honest. But it was an absolute decimation. An absolute decimation. He's a fighter with a really interesting upside, loads of pressure, loads of gas, goes out there, looks to hurt people, fluid in his striking, footwork's okay, tucks his chin pretty well, and is a good old age at 28. And then you have Saeed, right? And I mean, what are we going to say about this fella? You know what I mean? What are we going to say about Saeed fucking Nurmagomedov? That Kakramanov, what's his name?
Kakramanov.
That fight was a big old, by the way, boys, I'm really, really good. Because Kakramanov is a serious fighter. He can do the fighting really, really well.
And was dominating every second of that fight.
Right. And Saeed manages to jump a ghillie, which, as we talk about, doesn't happen in MMA. He gets it done. That, to me, it just tells you something. And the thing it tells you is that there's a never say die attitude, and he has answers. If you ask him really difficult questions of, right, I'm kind of beating the fuck out of you here, dude. What are you going to do? He's like, I got this.
Yeah. He's got that little trump card that he can just pull out every once in a while. That, yep, it's not going the right way. Oh, you made a mistake and I'm going to take your neck home. Because that's what that was. I adore this fight because it feels like the right challenge for Jonathan Martinez at this time. I, like you, didn't need to see the Cub Swanson. I want fights like this for him. I want to see this test because I know who Saeed Nurmagomedov is. He is a lower third of the top 10, very high in the second 15, dangerous dude that if you make mistakes, he's going to beat you. You have to be really good to beat him. And so I want to find out on Saturday if Jonathan Martinez is really good. He might be. We haven't really gotten a chance through no fault of his own, right? You can only fight the guys they book you against. You can only sign contracts for the names that they put in front of you. He has done well over these last 10, 12 fights to get to where he is now. Now is when the rubber meets the road. Now is when we get to see if this is... I've said it about his teammate, Chris Gutierrez, a couple of times. Is this a guy that is looking very good against middling competition? Or is this a guy that is actually a capital G guy? We find out on Saturday.
We really do. I can't wait. Screamer of a fight.
We're going to bundle through these next couple contender series pairings. Light heavyweights Vitor Petrino and Anton Turkai, and then heavyweights Carl Williams and Łukasz Brzeski. They're contender series fights. They're first and second appearances of contender series alumni. We don't know a lot about them yet in terms of their overall skill, their overall futures in this promotion at this level. Saturday is about getting those first looks, making those first reads. Maybe one of them, maybe two of them show out. But for right now, they both of these matchups feel like just wait and see. Just sit and watch and see what we can glean from these pairings, because there's not a lot on paper yet to take from either of these matchups. I was waiting for that. Brings us back to bantamweight, pair of veterans, Rafael Assunção, Davy Grant. A phenomenal fight. Two veteran guys, perfect, long-term, tenured ecosystem fighters in the 135-pound weight class. It was originally supposed to be Assunção against Kyler Phillips, which would have been a very different sort of matchup and a very different sort of test. But you want to give me these two dudes on a Saturday afternoon? I'm always in, and I know you are too.
Yeah, super fan favorite fighters. Super fan favorite fighters. It would have been better, I think, from a card placement perspective, to have these at the headlining the prelim thing. But I mean, look, whatever. The card placement is a debate for another day. But I kind of like David Grant in this fight. Maybe I'm a little naive, but I just don't feel like Assunção throws enough, and Davy Grant throws a lot. And I don't think Assunção has massive power. And I think Davy Grant doesn't have massive power either, but can crack a bit. And I don't know, Assunção's been fighting a long time. And is definitely on the decline of his career. Not to say David Grant isn't, like, surely, what is he, like 307 years old? But
take the zero out of there, and yes.
Yeah, 37, yeah. And they're just both all action, all fun fights. I don't think we're going to learn anything necessarily from an analysis perspective, but it'll be very fun for however long it lasts.
So he spoke to Assunção on Monday, and we were talking about the 4-fight losing streak that he was on, what it felt like to get back in the win column against Victor Henry last time out, sense of relief, all of that stuff. Were you thinking about retiring during that 4-fight losing streak? Of course it was. Don't want to be taking these knockouts, right? Because he had lost consecutive bouts by knockout. And I said, listen, man, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask, is this going to be the last one? And he said, yeah, I think it is, bud. I think it is. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is. And that makes a lot of sense to me. He's 40 years old. He's been in a hell of a lot of fights. He wants to go out the way he wants to go out. Now, unfortunately, you don't always get control of that. And Davy Grant will be on the opposite side of the octagon trying to ensure that you don't go out the way you want. But I'm happy to see him break that slide at least and show one more time, last time out, that he is capable. Selfishly, as somebody that's talked to him a bunch, I want to see him go out with his hand raised. But I think these two guys are just going to, as you said, get out there and put on a fan favorite fight of the night caliber fight where we don't learn anything. As you said, it's a fight that on Tuesday, we will just sit here and chuckle and smile about these two dudes going and banging the hell out of each other for 15 minutes or however long it takes, tipping our cap to Assunção if he does leave the gloves in the octagon, and moving on. Which brings us to the middleweight division. Cedrikas Dumas, the one contender series fighter that I do want to touch on a little bit, making his debut here against Josh Fremd, a Sean Sheehan favorite. You're intrigued by Dumas. I'm assuming it's for the same reasons as me. He's got some length. He's got some finishing power. He's a unique sort of specimen in this division. Hasn't been tested yet. Hasn't faced anywhere near a UFC caliber level of competition. But there's intrigue.
Absolutely. And in a middleweight division that is as light as it is, and we talk about this all the time, somebody of his physique and body type and sort of proclivity when the cage door closes, it could be really interesting. Now, in the same vein as a bunch of other fighters you've already mentioned, he's very untested, and there's lots and lots of things here that we can be looking at, and he will, I'm sure, be tested in the future. This fight shouldn't be a test, mind you. It feels to me like the UFC kind of are already putting a touch, a sprinkle, a salt, a seasoning of stock into this man and saying, well, look, he looks the part, he does a bit of the talking, and he does the finishing things. And so let's just ease him in, slide him in nicely, and see what he does, nestled in a portion of the card where people aren't going to be paying huge attention to him. And so there's not a massive amount of pressure there. Obviously, he's still very young in his MMA career, a good amount of amateur fights on his record. So, it's not like he's coming in like a fish out of water. But yeah, let's see. Let's just see. Loads of questions to ask.
Yeah, and it's the perfect sort of, and if you lose, then we know. Then we know. And that doesn't mean we know and we're done with you forever. It just means we temper all expectations and we give you the next 2 fights where you have to really make an impression. Because, as always, no disrespect to the man himself, but Josh Fremd is a guy that Cedric Dumas should beat. We go back to bantamweight. Mario Batista is fighting Guido Canetti, and these 2 dudes are going to get out there. And within the first 36 seconds of this fight, they're going to be bombing on one another. And I cannot wait. Mario Batista is one of my favorite kind of under the radar, ascending, keep an eye on this dude fighters, not just in this division, but overall. And Guido Canetti, for being, as you would say, 403 years old, has looked good in his last 2 fights, getting Chris Matinho and Randy Costa out of there. And he's going to come out and push Mario Batista. And I cannot wait for this. Okay, explain the face.
Is he?
He's going to come and be in his face. That's all I mean. He's going to come out and he's going to be like, look, man, I want to fight. He may not offer anything. He may not end up, he may have that moment. So remember at the start of February, the Derek Lewis, Sergey Spivak fight, road to UFC finales. We had Kazama against Rinya Nakamura, and Kazama came out and was like, I want to fight. And Rinya Nakamura was like, cool, so do I. And then Kazama went, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I think this is going to be similar. I think Guido Canetti is going to come across and he's going to have, I think he's got a big heart tattoo on his chest and the family name and all of those things. And he's going to come across and he's going to want to fight. And then Mario Batista is going to be like, cool, dude, so do I. Here's a left in your ribs. Let's see how much you really want to fight. That's all I mean.
I think it will be similar to when the start of Cyril and John, where they touch hands, Batista throws one of those devilish leg kicks, and Canetti's like, oh, I made a mistake. I made a big mistake. As a 43-year-old man, he's got some attributes, but I'm pretty high on Batista, to be honest.
For sure.
I really am. And I think he's 29. If he beats Canetti, let's see something. Let's see something pushed up slightly.
I thought it should have been here.
Yeah. I don't disagree.
It should have been here. Great fight. We still have one more bantamweight fight. Before we get to it, JJ Aldrich, Ariane Lipsky, you and I and Shawnee Podcasts are all fans of JJ Aldrich. Explain to the people what it is that she brings to the table that makes us happy to see her compete anytime she steps in the cage.
She's just a really well put together striker in that it's fundamentals done really, really well. Her footwork is always pretty good. She's got a really, really good jab, knows when to time her jab, knows how to enter the pocket, knows when to throw combinations, can work the body well, does a bit of the leg kicking. Yeah. Really, really solid, well put together fighter. Not a fighter you're going to see win a title, right, but a really well put together fighter.
Lipsky thus far in her UFC career, to me, has been a disappointment. She's 29 now. She's 3-5 in the UFC. Knocked out last time by Priscilla Cachoeira. The wins are Mandy Baum, Luana Carolina, and Isabella de Padua. Not fighters that are sticking around the UFC long term. There's always that maybe But I think for me, at least, I am past the point of maybe this is the one where she puts it all together and she turns it around. I think she's just been a disappointment and it just hasn't worked out at this level. She was great in KSW. She was great. And she just isn't able to translate that at this tier.
Yeah, and I mean, look, for JJ Aldrich was jabbing the face off Erin Blanchfield, the same Erin Blanchfield that outstruck Jessica Andrade a couple weeks ago, right? And so, look, sometimes you just run into guillotines and things happen, and what are you gonna do? But ask fucking Said Nurmagomedov. But it's one of those things where Lipski is probably going to come forward, and JJ will just jab the face off her for a couple of rounds and maybe finish her. But yeah, I mean, I agree. It's sad about Lipski because she had a lot of upside. But these things happen in MMA.
Final bantamweight fight, first bantamweight fight of the night, Victor Henry, Tony Gravely. It's a good fight. It's one of those reminders of why bantamweight is so good. These guys are nowhere near contention. They're both coming off losses, and it's a really compelling, interesting, going to be a fun fight. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on it, though. It's just that. It's a good fight between two guys that we enjoy watching fight.
Yep. I mean, you burst on the scene with a win over Hani Barcelos, and then you lose to Rafael Assunção for Victor Henry. Like, it is what it is. This is a tough division, and Tony Gravely is a very, very good fighter, and yeah, it would be a solid fight.
We open the night at flyweight. Tyson Nam, Bruno Silva, the return of Bruno Silva after 2 years away. He had those 2 wins in 3 months in 2021 over JP Bays and over Victor Rodriguez, and then he's been a ghost ever since. I'm intrigued about this by this man and by this fight because I know what Tyson Nam is going to do. He's going to come out and he's going to look to hit you with absolute missiles. And before he went away, Bruno Silva was happy to go out there and be like, cool, bro, I'm in too. Let's go. Let's see.
Yep. I like both fighters. I think Tyson Nam is better than his record shows.
Agreed.
Especially in his UFC tenure. The losses are against really, really good competition, and he's got some good wins in there too. And so, yeah, it'll be a very, very fun fight to open up a very, very fun card.
Yeah, overall, a really entertaining card, a good collection of fights top to bottom. As we've said, bantamweight on full display, some divisional significance in the upper tiers of these fights in the towards the main event and on the main card. Some questions going to be answered about some young fighters, some questions going to be answered about some contender series fighters. This is kind of all I expect from a Saturday. This is more than I expect from a Saturday after a pay-per-view, especially one as loaded as UFC 285 was. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to sitting down and talking about it on Tuesday with you. I'm looking forward to reading the spotlight on Monday. You already mentioned you think it'll be probably Said Nurmagomedov or Jonathan Martinez, whoever wins that fight. Maybe somebody will surprise us. We will wait and see. But for now, we thank you for watching. We thank you for listening. We hope you enjoy the fights. Ian, Olivia, enjoy your trip. We will see you in a couple of weeks' time. For Harry, I am Spencer. Take care of yourself.